Hi, I'm Dr. Yen Reyes. I'm an infectious disease specialist and a pediatrician. I will be talking about medical updates, lifestyle, and health. So please subscribe to my channel and click the notification button.
I am tasked to discuss about the 2023 vaccine calendar updates. So as mentioned, it changes every year. So we have to keep up with the times. So I will now share my screen. Good evening again. So this is the title of my lecture, 2023 Vaccine Calendar Updates. Once again, I'm Dr. Yen Reyes, also from PPS SDC, and I'm your treasurer. So the outline of my lecture is first, we have to review some immunization principles, then present the proposed updated childhood immunization calendar for 2023. Then we will talk about the new vaccine formulations and indications. So the process of the updates in the childhood immunization schedule is very tedious. It has to be locally registered and licensed by the Philippine Food and Drug Administration. There should be a certificate of registration. It should be reviewed and recommended by the immunization committees of both the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society of the Philippines and the Philippine Pediatric Society, and endorsed by the Philippine Foundation for Vaccination. The National Immunization Program is only adapted from the Department of Health, and there is yearly review to keep the calendar updated. So if you can see here, this is the Childhood Immunization Schedule 2023. So you can actually see this immunization calendar at the website of the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society of the Philippines and the Philippine Pediatric Society. As mentioned here, it is also endorsed by the Philippine Foundation for Vaccination. So before we will go on that, we have some principles of immunization review. So the spacing and administration of live and inactivated vaccines. So it is very important because we also have to teach the local health centers, because sometimes they refer to us vaccines which are not available in the local health center. Like for example, what is the spacing between two inactivated vaccines, like the chickenpox and the typhoid vaccine? There's no spacing. It may be administered simultaneously or at any interval between the doses. So if the patient comes to you and the patient wants a inactivated hepatitis A vaccine together with a typhoid vaccine, it can be done. And if they want it 2 weeks apart or 1 week apart or 1 day apart, it is also allowed because there is no spacing. How about inactivated and live vaccine? So like, for example, the patient was already given MMR vaccine at the local health center at 1 month old, and the patient comes to you. I know the patient was given the MMR vaccine at 1 year old at our local health center. And then the patient comes to you and wants the hepatitis A vaccine at 1 year old also. So is there an interval? No. It can be administered simultaneously. So if the patient was just given the MMR, you can just give the inactivated hepatitis A at any time or at any interval between doses. You can give it 1 day apart. You can give it 2 days apart, 1 week apart, or 2 months apart. So every time you have referrals, most of the time I receive referrals, and it is always quoted in the local health center that it has to be 2 weeks apart. There is no 2 weeks in the spacing interval. So it can be given, if it is inactivated and live, it can be given at any time between doses. How about 2 live parenteral? The patient was given MMR vaccine at 1 year old, and the patient wants to have the chickenpox vaccine. The patient comes to you after 1 week. This is not allowed because the the major principle for two live parenteral, like the MMR and the chickenpox, is there should be a 4-week minimum interval, if not administered simultaneously. However, if the patient comes to you April 27, and the patient was given the MMR vaccine in the local health center and comes to your office for a chickenpox vaccine, because there's an outbreak of chickenpox, for example, in their community, it can be done because it is given simultaneously within 1 day. However, if the patient comes to you after 1 week, it is no longer allowed because two live parenteral vaccines, there should be a 4-week minimum interval. How about two live oral vaccine? The patient was given at example 10 weeks of age with oral polio vaccine, and then the midwife referred it to you for oral rotavirus vaccine. Will you give it? Yes. Even if it is 1 day or 2 hours interval, it's allowed because there is no interval between two live oral, like for example, the rotavirus and the polio vaccine. So if the patient comes to you for rotavirus vaccine after being given a polio vaccine in the health center, carpe diem, seize the opportunity because that may be the only time that the parents want to have the rotavirus vaccine to save the child from having the rotavirus diarrhea. So the two live oral vaccine may be administered simultaneously or at any interval between the doses. So what should I do if the minimum age or minimum interval was not followed? If the minimum age or minimum interval was violated, the dose is invalid. A repeat dose should be administered for at least a minimum interval from the last dose. Like, for example, the patient was given a penta from the health center at 4 weeks, at 6, 10. Like, for example, at 10 weeks. And then eventually, the grandmother brought the patient to another health center at 12 weeks. So the interval is only 2 weeks. So that is the same vaccine. So since the minimum interval is violated, because if it is the same vaccine, it must have a minimum of 4 weeks interval. Since it is violated, the repeat dose should be administered for at least the minimum interval from the last dose. So there should be a repeat dose because the one given was already invalid because there's a violation of the minimum interval. So what are the exceptions of the minimum interval? Measles vaccination during a measles outbreak may be administered as early as 6 months of age. The dose can be repeated at 12 months of age or older. Vaccine doses given up to 4 days before the minimum interval or age are not counted as valid. The grace period does not apply to rabies vaccine. So once again, this is the childhood immunization schedule for 2023. So what is important there are the annotations. Like for example, the BCG. The BCG, as we mentioned, is given 0.05 for less than 12 months and 0.1 already for more than 12 months. The earliest possible age after birth, preferably within the first 2 months of life, you should give the BCG. For healthy infants and children more than 2 months who are not given BCG at birth, a PPD prior to BCG vaccination is not necessary. However, PPD is recommended prior to BCG vaccination if any of the following is present. Number 1, there is the presence of congenital TB. Number 2, there is history of close contact to known or suspected infectious cases. And number 3, there are clinical findings suggestive of TB and or X-ray suggestive of tuberculosis. How about diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, or the DPT vaccine? Once again, it is given at a minimum of 6 weeks. The primary series is 3 doses with an interval of 4 weeks. So booster doses consists of 3 doses until adolescence with the following schedule. So these are the booster dose. The first is at 12 to 23 months, regularly at 1 year and 8 months and 1 year and 6 months. The next is 4 to 7 years old. And the third booster should be at 9 to 15 years old in the form of the Tdap. There is capital T already and small d. Ideally, the minimum interval between the booster dosage should be at least 4 years. How about Haemophilus influenza B? It is given at the 3-dose primary series at a series of minimum age of 6 weeks and a minimum interval of 4 weeks. So a booster dose, there's only one at 12 to 15 months, or you can give it at 1 year, 6 months, or 18 months old. You are no longer allowed to give the HIV as a booster at 4 to 6 years old. That's why you'll just give that Tdap already, because regularly 4 years and above, Haemophilus influenza is no longer a common cause of infection in that age group. How about hepatitis A? In the Philippines, we already have the inactivated hepatitis A since the start. It is given IM. The minimum age is 12 months and 2-dose series, and the interval between the first and second dose is 6 months to 1 year. We also have the live attenuated hepatitis A. It is usually a single dose, and it is given subcutaneously, because regularly those who are live attenuated are generally given subcutaneously, and it is given at around 18 months or 1 year, 6 months. So if it is inactivated hepatitis A, 1 year old, live attenuated hepatitis A, 18 months or 1 year and 6 months. Please remember that. So what are the vaccines for high risk or special groups? These are the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine or pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine. So it is usually given intramuscularly in immunocompromised children and those with high-risk medical conditions. They should receive both PCV and PCV23. So the two vaccines should not be co-administered. As much as possible, don't use it simultaneously. The minimum interval between PCV and Pneumo23 is 8 weeks, a minimum of 8 weeks. If a dose of Pneumo23 is advertently given at an earlier than the recommended interval, this dose should not be repeated. All recommended PCV doses should be given prior to Pneumo23 as much as possible. So this is a busy slide, but it is already there as a part of the annotation, but I just have to highlight it because a lot of persons usually commit mistakes with this. So for 2 months to 5 years, 24 months to 5 years old, so this is 1 to 2 years old, administer 1 dose of PCV if only 3 doses of PCV was received previously. That means there's a total of 4 doses, 3 doses prior, and then 1 dose of PCV. Give the first and second doses of Pneumo23. So we will discuss here which one to give this first one dose and which are the indications for the 2 doses of Pneumo23 at least 8 weeks after the most recent dose of PCV. So these indications are for 1 dose only. Those who have chronic heart disease, including congestive heart failure and cardiomyopathies, those with chronic lung disease, including COPD, diabetes mellitus, CSF leaks, cochlear implants, alcoholism, and chronic liver disease. However, these are the indications for the 2 doses. Those with sickle cell disease, congenital or acquired asplenia, HIV, renal failure, and diseases associated with immunosuppressive drugs, congenital or acquired immunodeficiency, leukemia, Hodgkin's, malignancy, solid organ transplant, and multiple myeloma. So with these are the indications for giving 1 dose of Pneumo23 and 2 doses of Pneumo23. So for 1 year old to 5 years old, you can administer 2 doses of PCV at least 8 weeks apart if unvaccinated of less than 3 doses of PCV was received previously. Give 1 or 2 doses of Pneumo 23 at least 8 weeks after the most recent dose of PCV. So this is for 1 year to 5 years old. For 6 to 18 years old, administer 1 dose of Pneumo 20 of PCV 13 if they have not previously received this vaccine, and give 1 or 2 doses of Pneumo 23 at least 6 to 8 weeks after the most recent dose of PCV. So 6 to 18 years old, 1 dose of PCV and Pneumo 23 as indicated. Okay, I hope that's clear. So what are the updates on the new vaccines? So the vaccines in the Philippine National Immunization Program, or the NIP, are the following: the BCG, the Hep B, the pentavalent, bivalent OPV, IPV, PCV, MMR, MR, and TT. So the recommended vaccines are the vaccines not included in the NIP, which are recommended by the Philippine Pediatric Society, PIDSP, and the PFB. So we have at 6 months, the flu vaccine is not part, the Japanese encephalitis vaccine, the rotavirus vaccine, the chickenpox vaccine, the hepatitis A vaccine, and the meningococcal vaccine. So they are recommended as indicated. So these are the National Immunization Program will usually cover 1-year-old and below, and they label the child as fully immunized child, or FIC, if they receive the vaccines under the National Immunization Program. That's why we always have to talk with our parents, because sometimes they believe that it is already complete, because the midwives tell them that the patient is already FIC, or fully immunized child. But with the recommended vaccines from the PPS and the PIDSP and the PFB, the patient will already be completely immunized child, or CIC. So this is the immunization schedule given by our local health center. These are free, as mentioned. The BCG, the Hep B, both of them are given at birth, and these are covered by the PhilHealth. So 6, 10, and 14 weeks, they give the pentavalent. So remember, the penta at health center is the DPT, Hep B, and the HIB. That's why they give the oral polio, also 6, 10, and 14 weeks, with the additional inactivated polio at 14 weeks. And then the PCV are also free. And then 9 months is the measles, and then 1-year-old is the MMR. So the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine is given intramuscularly at the minimum of 6 weeks. The primary vaccination consists of 3 doses with an interval of 4 weeks. So if previously unvaccinated, 7 to 11 months, give 3 doses, as we discussed. For previously unvaccinated children, 12 months to 5 years old, if it is PCV10, 1 to 5 years old, give 2 doses 2 months apart. If it is PCV13, so this is different. 12 to 23 months before 2 years old, you have to give 2 doses 2 months apart. But if they're already 2 to 5 years old and you will give PCV13, you only give 1 dose. But if it is PCV10, 2 to 5 years old, you will still give 2 doses 2 months apart. How about PCV15? So I believe that some of you already have PCV15 and some may have already injected this. So this is a pneumococcal polysaccharide conjugate vaccine, which is 15-valent, additional of 3. It is indicated for 6 weeks to 17 years of age prior to the 18th birthday for active immunization for the prevention of invasive disease, pneumonia, acute otitis media caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae. There is an additional 22F, 23F, and 33F. So it is a 3-dose regimen. 2-dose primary series followed by a toddler dose. So regularly, our PCV 13 is and 10 are 3 plus 1. So this one is 2 plus 1. So how do you give the 3 doses? The first dose at 6 to 12 weeks of age, and the second dose is 8 weeks later. So it is just a 2 months interval. The third dose should be administered at approximately 11 to 15 months of age. So that completes the 3-dose series. However, for preterm infants who are less than 37 weeks of this gestation, we have to give the 4-dose regimen. So the 3-dose primary series followed by a toddler dose. The first dose is given as early as 6 to 12 weeks, which is the regular giving of the PCV, with an interval of 4 to 8 weeks between doses in the primary series. So it can be given 1 to 2 months later. The fourth dose is administered at 11 to 15 months of age and at least 2 months from the third dose. Okay, so PCV 15, 3 doses for a regular child, but for preterm infants less than 37 weeks, 4 doses. So how do you do catch up for children 7 months to 17 years of age? For children 7 months to 17 years of age who are pneumococcal vaccine naive, never given, or not fully vaccinated, or completed a dosing regimen with lower valency pneumococcal conjugate vaccine. So what is the dosage for 7 to 11 months of age? Can you answer in the chat box so that you'll be awake? Is it letter A, single dose, 7 to 11 months, naive? Is it 2 doses with an interval of 2 months? Or is it 3 doses? With the first dose given at 4 weeks apart, the third dose is given 12 months of age, separated by the second dose of at least 2 months. So the answer is letter C, 3 doses, 7 months to 17 years, and pneumococcal vaccine naive. 3 doses, first 2 doses, 4 weeks apart. The third dose is given 12 months of age and separated by at least 2 months. If previous pneumococcal vaccine was administered, at least 2 months should elapse before receiving the pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine 15-valent. So for children, 12 months to 23 months, so 1 year to before 2 years old, they need 2 doses with an interval of 2 months between the doses. Children 2 to 17 years old, they need only a single dose. If a previous pneumococcal vaccine was administered, at least 2 months should elapse before receiving the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine 15-valent. So even if the patient was already given PCV 13, you can give the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine PCV 15. But at least there should be 2 months that should elapse, or there should be an interval of 2 months. So how about meningococcal vaccine? So they can be given IM or subcutaneously. The tetravalent meningococcal vaccine is given IM. So the tetravalent meningococcal polysaccharide vaccine are also indicated for those with high risk of the invasive disease, like persistent complement deficiencies, presence of HIV, travelers or resident to areas where meningococcal disease is hyperendemic or endemic, like doctors. You always travel a lot. So if you travel to places where meningococcal disease is prevalent, you also have to have yourselves vaccinated. So the MCV is given at a minimum of 9 months. For children 9 to 23 months, give 2 doses, 3 months apart. For children 2 years old and above, give only 1 dose, except in cases of asplenia, HIV, persistent complement deficiency. So this is the meningococcal conjugated with diphtheria. So how about the MCVTT? It can be given for 6 weeks. For infants 6 to 12 weeks of age, give the first 2 doses at least 2 months apart. and the third dose is at 12 months. So the MCVTT is given at a minimum of 6 weeks because there are a lot of cases of meningococcemia in less than 1 year old. So if you'll use the MCVTT, it is given 6 weeks old and 2 doses, 2 months apart, and the third dose at 1 year old. So 2+1. So if you use the MCV cream given to children 2 years old and above, a single dose, revaccinate with MCV for vaccine every 5 years as the person remains at risk of infection. So you have to revaccinate if the patient is still at risk of infection, as the patient is living in an epidemic place or they keep on going to a place where there are meningococcal outbreaks. So MCV-TT is a vaccine that can be given to children from 1 year of age, adolescents specifically, against A, C, W, and Y. And 1 dose contains the active substances, 10 micrograms Neisseria meningitidis group A, C, Y, W, and conjugated to tetanus toxoid. So this is the MCV-TT. How about the polio virus? The polio IPV is given intramuscularly or in combination with DPT vaccines. It is given at a minimum dose of 4 weeks. It is given at the minimum age of 6 weeks, and it should be given 4 weeks apart. So regularly, it is given at 6, 10, and 14 weeks. So the OPV, IPV as part of the National Immunization Program. The OPV is available as part of the government's NIP. The primary series consists of 3 doses, as we mentioned in their chart, 6, 10, and 14 weeks. The first dose of IPV is given with the third dose of OPV. So usually it is given at 14 weeks. The second dose of IPV is given together with the measles vaccine at 9 months, because we had just became polio-free in 2022 after the outbreak last 2019. So we have to give 2 more doses of IPV, the first one at 14 weeks, and then the second one is during the measles vaccination at 9 months. So these are the inactivated polio vaccine recommendation. So among healthy infants, we recommend bivalent oral polio plus inactivated polio vaccine or IPV alone if both bivalent OPV is not available. Thank you very much for listening. I really hope that you learned from this updated immunization schedule. If not, you can still check the website of the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society of the Philippines. We still have the vaccine calendar there, or you can also check the website of the PPS. So thank you again for listening.